Michael Osterlink here, and I'm with Nancy Eichhorn, PhD. She's the founding editor-in-chief of Somatic Psychotherapy today. She's a freelance writer, editor, and teacher. Her writing resume includes over 5,000 newspaper and magazine articles and chapters in professional anthologies, including When Hurt Remains, Relational Perspectives on Therapeutic Failure, About Relational Body Psychotherapy, and the Body in Relationship. She's an avid hiker, cyclist, kayaker, paddler, backpacker. Nature's innocence offers her solace and the space for inner expression in a physically outward way. How you doing, Nancy?
I'm doing really well, Michael. How are you today?
Good. It's good to see you. So for our listening audience, I think it'd be great if you could explain to us what you mean by somatics and somatic psychotherapy.
I'll give it a shot here. When I started growing up, I guess, my parents were very involved in therapy. They're involved with Tom and Amy Harris with I'm Okay, You're Okay. They got really involved in the Bowen theory. They got involved in marital family therapy. They were doctors. So my idea of sort of life and therapy was always what's in my head. How do I talk about it? How do I phrase it? And as I got more involved in my own path, my own goal with writing and teaching writing, especially with students, I started learning that their stories were really in their body. And what they were trying to write about was this felt sense of who am I? And how do I see myself and experience myself in my relationships with my friends, with my world, with my environment. So when I went into grad school and started studying psychology, I just realized I'm a head person and I want to be more in my body. I want more of the experience of what does it feel like to be Nancy? And how do I feel my emotions and feel and experience what's happening energetically? So then I learned that there's this whole school of thought called Somatic Psychology, which is based on Europe's body psychotherapy. But a lot of people hear the word body and they think like body worker, like a massage therapist or a physical therapist. And when we're talking body or soma, we're talking about Thomas Hanna's definition of the soma or the psyche and the being. So when we use this term, somatic psychology or body psychotherapy, fairly interchangeable, we're talking about an umbrella term for a lot of methodologies that help people become more mindful and present of their body in its entirety, even down to the cellular sense. I mean, one of the things that we include in somatic psychology is pre and perinatal psychology and health, and looking at what's happening even preconception, conception, and all of those moments of our being are part of our consciousness in our cellular level, but not in our hippocampal brain. And again, when we start talking about work or trauma, we start thinking about, well, a lot of the sensations that are stored are in the amygdala part of the brain, which stores our feelings, our senses, sounds, flashbacks, but there's no narrative, there's no story. So somatic psychologists will work with both the narrative, which is like a story that I can tell you, but also the felt sense and what's happening in the body. A lot of people have created schematics of the body. Stanley Kellerman has a great one on the emotions of the body. We've got the armature and the characters, coming from the greats in Europe. And what do they look like? We've got moving cycles and movement and dance. We've got art is drawing. We've got singing. We've got voice. Now we have Steve Porges's work with the polyvagal theory and our whole social engagement system. And we're really working with that in terms of how do we have a felt sense of ourselves and who we are, and how do we be in that felt sense and start making choices about what we're about and what we're doing. So it's kind of a long-winded answer, but so when we talk about somatics and body psychotherapy, we're talking about the whole essence of our being. So it's our physicality, our emotion, our spirit, our energy, our everything.
You mentioned Thomas Hanna, and I believe one of the definitions of somatics is a body as experienced from within. But you also mentioned massage, and from my training and experience, it's both and I like your understanding of this. It's both the body as experienced from within at all levels, from cellular all the way to the full organism. But it's also, as a therapist, someone could work with you on manipulating your physical structure, whether it's the fascia, the muscles, or such things. So it's kind of objective and subjective. And I've also heard you kind of bring in intersubjective. So it's kind of all these spaces integrated together in a broader field of psychology than just the head.
Yes, yeah, and definitely touch
Yeah.
and movement is a part a lot of. I mean, I remember even just when I was teaching, and I'm a what would you call it, a Reiki practitioner.
Okay. Yeah.
I do work, and I'd be sitting in circle time as a reading specialist, and the second grader would be sitting in the circle for reading time, and she'd have a bellyache, and she'd snuggle on my lap, and I just put my hands on her belly, and just do a little Reiki. She had no clue, and her tummy ache would be all better.
Yeah.
And I don't know, honestly, if it was the Reiki or just the physical contact, the touch, feeling, and attuning to my body, my presence, my calmness. It could be all of those things combined. Right. But I know, especially when I was working with private clients in New Hampshire, I did a lot of work with touch and contact for grounding as part of the titration process when we're working with trauma and we're kind of swinging in a little bit, but swinging out and touching in. And movement really helps, and touch really helps in so many situations. Appropriate, of course.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because consent from the individual client or clients for them to understand what you're attempting to do and the outcome. Especially today with a lot of the issues in our culture, it's important to point out that consent is really important to when you touch someone, whether it's professionally or any other kind of relationship you might have with someone. But so you've gone from working with individual clients, and now you have an amazing magazine. This is how you got connected, because I am a subscriber to it. And actually, it's interesting that you brought up the pre and perinatal, because that is part of this issue. What led you to go from creating, from working with individual clients to deciding I need to create a magazine on this broad subject of somatic psychotherapy?
Well, it actually started when I was in graduate school.
Okay.
And one of the professors, Ray Johnson, asked if I wanted to be a student editor for the United States Association of Body Psychotherapy's newsletter. And I had no idea what that association was. I never heard of it. I was brand new into getting my master's at Santa Barbara Graduate Institute before it closed. And all I knew is it involved writing. And I yes, it's about writing. I'll do it. And so that got me involved in more of the writing components of psychotherapy and what was being written and how it was being written. And in my experience, I could see that we have associations, the European Association for Body Psychotherapy, we have APA for pre and perinatal, and they have great newsletters, and they've got the peer-reviewed journals. I worked as a peer reviewer, and then I've also was co-editor of the International Body Psychotherapy Journal. So I got involved in the academic component. So I saw the really familiar newsletter association part, and I saw the really academic part. And there was nothing in the middle for my classmates and I to write about our experiences. They weren't research. They were just, our clinical experiences, our felt sense experiences, what's happening with us, with our clients. And there was nowhere for that to go. So I thought we need a magazine. And I know we have Psychotherapy Network, or we have Psychology Today, but they're more cognitive behavioral therapy based. And I felt like we needed a place for our voices to share with our colleagues, and also to let other people in this world know about this other way of doing psychotherapy, of coming in to seek support, to seek help. I was running writing groups in New Hampshire under the guise of writing groups. I had one group that was with me for 8 years. Every 8 weeks, they signed back up, and one of the women, she was a retired professor from the University of New Hampshire. She said, "This is the cheapest group therapy I've ever had."
Nice.
Because so much of writing is our story, and I would bring in those components of self and relationship and character, and how to come into understanding of a character through understanding yourself. So to me, writing has always been such a part of that. And I love working with writers, and I love the content. So for me, it was like the perfect wedding. And then I had a family experience with my mother being stage 4 cancer. And I had to basically drop everything, clients, classes, come from New Hampshire to California. And after 3 recurrences, I knew I could no longer be in a classroom or face-to-face with clients. I had to do something that allowed me the flexibility to be with my family. My mom at 89 is on hold. We're on maintenance drugs. She's great. My
Oh,
dad's
good,
not
good.
great. But I just really found the sense of I can be engaged, I can still be in relationship, I can still be in the field, and contribute the way that I know best, which is through writing, either helping people write or write.
Now, you mentioned you got your graduate degree at Santa Barbara. What's the full name of the graduate school you went to?
Well, I started at the Santa Barbara Graduate Institute, but it
Okay.
has since closed. The
Mhm.
Chicago School of Professional Psychology bought them. So for my doctorate to finish up my doctoral work, I was at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology.
Okay. Because in the field of somatic psychology, for instance, I did my postgraduate work at the California Institute for Integral Studies under Don Johnson. Amazing group of teachers and professors there. Can you kind of talk about the field broadly? Like, if someone's actually interested in getting an MA or a PhD, what are some of the schools that are available and or specific programs that are available? If they just kind of want to do the Google and see what's out there in terms of professional
Well,
development.
yeah, we've got the California Institute of Integral Studies,
Yeah.
Pacifica Graduate Institute. Ray Johnson's a professor there. They have a wonderful program that you can do. And Barnaby Barrett, who was a lot of these people were on staff at Santa Barbara Graduate Institute. I mean, I had the cream of the crop there. I had Marty Glenn, I had Barnaby Barrett, I had Ray Johnson, I had Jill Kern. I mean, I just had Christine Caldwell,
Yeah.
Stella Resnick. I mean, I just got to study with some of these phenomenal people. And so Barnaby is actually starting an online doctoral program. I've got just starting to get little whispers of that information coming in.
Okay.
But JFK, John F. Kennedy's got a program. Naropa has a master's and with some work in somatics. So the programs are out there. Part of what I thought was really special for because of my degree, my PhD is actually clinical psychology,
Okay.
but with a somatic focus.
Nice.
And because of my somatic focus, I had to take 6 courses at Esalen Institute. So I got to work with Ron Hertz before he passed. I got to study with Ron.
Wow.
So there for a week in classes, learning and experiencing and being. So yeah, I got to take some incredible courses and learn different methods, but through the methodology and then doing my own work, really coming into an understanding of how this integrates and incorporates. I think finding the right school is really important.
Yeah.
Because if it's going to be online, like ours was partially online, but then we had on-campus experiences, and it's that person-to-person connection that really brings this work to light, I think. So the programs are out there, and there's a lot of, like you said, you can Google, and finding the faculty and the fit. I remember when I was going for my first, I'm kind of got 3 master's degrees.
Oh.
My first
Nice.
master's degree, I was thinking I had to go, to Harvard. It was in my brain. I had to get my it was an education degree in reading, and I needed to go to Harvard. And of course, I didn't get accepted to Harvard. I got accepted to the University of New Hampshire. Well, it turns out that's where the people were on faculty who were writing the books that I was studying and using at UC Berkeley. So
Okay.
I got to train with Don Graves, who started this whole writing as a process movement and using personal narrative and memoir for teaching writing and presence. And Jane Hansen was the reading. So I was guided beautifully to where I needed to be. And I ended up getting at Santa Barbara Graduate Institute, guiding where I needed to be. So there's always, I think, if you trust, you'll end up at the right school where you need to be to learn from the people who will teach you.
I think it's also important to point out too, because you've mentioned some amazing names in the field, and a lot of those same people have their own particular program that they've either created on their own, or they're like the second or third generation of a program that someone originally created. So even for someone who already has a master's or a PhD, or is a therapist or MFT or a social worker or a psychiatrist and is interested in somatics, they don't necessarily have to go back to get another graduate degree. They can actually find a very specific program that teaches the aspects of somatics that are interesting to them as well.
Yeah. Yes. There's some beautiful schools. Eileen Welch has a school up in Seattle. And again, she teaches a methodology, a way of bringing in, somatics. And you can find certification programs. Somatic Experiencing has their training programs, their foundation. Core Energetics has theirs, Biodynamics. There are so many ways to find what resonates with you, and integrate them into your style of working. I was always much more, because I've been a teacher my whole life, I always found that in my work with clients, I was much more vocal. I'm not psychoanalytic, sitting back and letting the person talk the whole time. It was much more interactive and engaged and back and forth, almost more of a coach, I guess, than a therapist. In a sense, I mean, I offered my opinion. I was there. So I was not a sort of neutral, listening, sort of unbiased bystander in the relationship. And other people think that, no, that's too much. You need to really just be there, be attuned, really be supportive and help them do their own discovery, a little guide, but really it's about them. And maybe at the right moment you sense where they just need a touch, like Ron would do. Ron Kurtz would know that maybe you just need a touch at this moment to ground or to be, and to go through the movement and the experience. So yeah, it's really about finding who you are, and your work, and going out there and bringing it all together in different ways.
Do you have some thoughts on why our culture is so negative towards human touch? Is seemingly negative towards human touch, unless it's very prescribed, like a doctor can touch a patient, or a massage therapist, if they're as long as the right kind of massage therapist can touch a patient. But even if you study you mentioned the Association for Pre and Perinatal Psychology and Health, and they just point out the importance of the breastfeeding example, or the importance of a mother holding a baby, just for the oxytocin release and the connection and brain development for both the baby and the mother. Yeah. But that seems so alternative. Somatics seems so alternative, but I mean, if you look at human beings, it should not be an alternative approach. It should be like the way it is. So if you agree with that assessment, why do you think our culture is so antithetical to how we were born or designed to be in the world in terms of relating to one another in that way? And also just the awareness of what's going on inside of ourselves, outside of just our rational self.
I find it strange, because we are so anti-body here in the United States.
Yeah.
I mean, it's supposed to be this perfect image. And I love when Steve Porges talks about and shows the pictures of people that get Botox, because they're trying to perfect their eyes or their lids or this, and you look at when they're and they become frozen. Yeah. And they actually become scary looking. And they would be like a person you wouldn't feel safe with, but they've got this image of being beautiful, but from a distance. There's just, we have this body boundary, this space that's so separate and apart. And it's like this armoring that says, you cannot touch me and you will not get near me. Here in the state of California, you're only allowed to touch a client if you're a doctor, a nurse, or a licensed massage therapist. Teachers, back when I was teaching elementary school here in the 80s, we used to give out get a free hug stub. Yeah. So when you caught a kid doing something good, you get them a get a free hug. And anytime they really needed a hug, they could come give this little card to somebody and they get a nice hug. Outlawed, not allowed to hug kids, can't touch kids. There's so much fear of pedophiles, of sexual abuse, of inappropriate touch, of somebody touching for their own need, not for the other person's need. And it's become this whole sense of divorce. We've become divorced from our own tactile experience of human skin. I don't think people even touch themselves. It's like they go through the day and it's like, what am I feeling? What do I feel like? What does my elbow feel like? Yeah. We don't even notice, our own sense of touching ourselves. Do we hug ourselves? And I think it's fear. I really think it's all fear-based.
Yeah.
It's just about people not having proper boundaries, and people creating a fear space that the boundaries will be violated, people will be hurt, instead of looking at the power of touch and the need. I mean, how desperately we need touch. We need it to survive. We've known that ancients. Very
binary thinking, either on or off.
Yeah.
bad, as opposed to recognizing it was what I'm hearing you say is that obviously you've got to respect boundaries and you got to be careful that because there are predators out there, but 99% of all people are not predators, and it's a healthy thing to both experience one's body within, like what's happening inside myself and how do I express that in a healthy way, and also touching other people. I mean, it seems to me biologically we're designed for that and we thrive under those conditions.
I find it fascinating that the groups that I hike with, everybody greets at the trailheads with hugs. Everybody's hugging everybody. Hi, how are you doing? You know, you meet somebody new. Hi, how you doing? There's a real, in this culture of these groups that I'm hiking with, there's a real culture of connection to the earth, connection to nature, connection to self and to other. And I think part of it's just, we know a lot now about nature therapy and being outdoors. But I just think also people realize the value of connection. And just, you know, it's not an embrace. It's a greeting hug. It's different than an embrace. But there is a sense of communion when there's this sort of a, hi, how you doing? You know, versus, you know, like a father embracing his daughter and holding and comforting and loving. And they're all important. I think all forms of touch are important.
Now, mainstream psychology, cognitive behavioral kind of fits into that model. Maybe some, you know, depending if you're relationship oriented, you can do some relationship stuff. It's still kind of cognitive behavioral oriented, although it might be more systemic. What kind of feedback have you heard over the years from what we might call more conventional therapists, from you know, who either see or have encountered with or work with somatic psychotherapists? What kind of feedback do you get from folks who are not in the field of somatic psychotherapy, but have at least heard of it or maybe worked with it or know someone who has worked with it?
I'm laughing because I was doing my internship hours at it's a community-based mental health program in New Hampshire. Cognitive behavioral everything.
Yeah.
I had to take, you know, lessons on cognitive behavioral trauma therapy, cognitive behavioral this, that. And I would be in my room working with my clients. My clients were all children. And I'd be doing art therapy, movement therapy, somatic therapy, mindfulness training, breath work. And, you know, my supervisor would be watching the videos of my training, and he just couldn't believe the results I was getting with kids that have been in the system for so long that got nowhere.
Yeah.
And by bringing in the somatics, all of a sudden, so more people in the clinic wanted to learn more about what I was doing and why.
Good.
And I find that when I'm out on the, you know, out on the trail, or I'm out on a group, whatever, and I meet people who are psychotherapists and we get to talking, they're curious.
Yeah.
And we are becoming more known through mindfulness meditation, mindfulness stress reduction. A lot of that is coming in. A lot of more energy work is coming in. And I find that when they find out about it, they want to pick up on one tool, like somatic experiencing has gotten very mainstream. You know, it's getting paid for by health insurances now for trauma work, where before you couldn't get them to pay for anything other than CBT. So I think that people are learning more and curious about it. And I think they want the information. They may not really know how, because if they're not embodied in themselves and they don't feel their own body and they don't know what, when you talk about Eugene Gendling's work with the felt sense, and you sense and feel into yourself, and they're all in their head and they don't have a body, they become scared, you know, because for them to touch in could be too scary. And if they're too scared to touch in, they can't even begin to help somebody else touch in. You have to feel comfortable in your own skin to be with somebody to help them start bridging. So I think it's coming into an era of, especially with trauma work, becoming more and more of a curiosity, more acceptance for it. I don't think we're called the woo-woo wacky people anymore. A lot of people would say, oh, that's too woo-woo for me, you know, and I'm not hearing that as much. I'm hearing more, can you tell me more? You know, how would that work in this situation, and what might you do? And I think it's really important that everybody understand that even in a somatically focused therapy approach, you're still doing cognitive behavioral therapy because you're still talking, you're still you're looking at changing a behavior, a mannerism, And you do process it, you do talk about it, you do go through a release. And part of the whole healing is that sort of reflection on it and thinking, well, what happened? Where did it happen? Why did it happen? How do I feel about it? What's my own experience of myself in that? And that's cognitive reasoning. So
Yes.
it's not illusion of, it's a how do we broaden and bring in lots of different approaches.
Yeah, actually, I really appreciate the fact that you acknowledge that cognitive behavioral and the use of the rational mind is important. It's a tool, but it has to be integrated into a larger framework of understanding the human being in our totality.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Being once a completely total head person,
Yeah.
I have to acknowledge my brain and my mind.
Yeah, exactly. So tell me a little about the Somatic Psychotherapy magazine.
Well, we are an international publication, and the goal is to be a place where practitioners can come and share their stories, share their experiences. We have interns that are just in the field doing their research, and they're writing book reviews, and they're starting to understand their place in the field and the literature in the field and how it impacts us. We get authors to write their reflection experience of writing the book and being present in that moment. We get people sharing theory they're doing, research they're doing. It's a magazine, but we do require American Psychological Association citation format.
Okay.
And if they make a claim, they really need to back it up. They can't just claim that radicchio mushrooms will cure all cancer when you don't need active therapy.
Yeah.
You need to cite some peer-reviewed literature that's been reviewed, that is in there, and that I can then go fact check. I do fact check.
Okay.
I spend
Good.
a lot of time going and running after what people are saying, and is this making sense? Is it true? Without a peer review panel, I'm basically the reviewer. I'm the editor. What comes in, I read. If I work with all my writers, and if it doesn't feel right, I ask them questions. I ask to substantiate. I want to know where this information is coming from so that I can look it up. We do a lot of writing back and forth for clarity, for movement. And a lot of times I'll get these incredible academic papers, but we're a magazine. We're not an academic journal.
Right.
I'm not publish a 20-page academic research paper, but we can find an excerpt of it,
Yeah.
and what's the critical component, what's going to help people understand what's happening in this field, in this research. But it's first person familiar voice. And I want it to be a community of sharing. And I love debate. We posted one paper that Barnaby Barrett wrote, and I put it up on a couple of our Facebook groups that we're part of. And he was talking about Freud, sort of being one of the founders of body psychotherapy. And she's like, no way, this one was no way did that. And somebody else came back with, well, actually, if you look at this, and then somebody else came back. And it's that kind of interaction that we're trying to stimulate, is to get people thinking, questioning, challenging, talking, accepting, rejecting, because not everything is true. So much of what we say and do is based on our perspective and our interpretation of it. So how can we expand our awareness and play with our interpretations and maybe make some room for shift or for growth? And so our articles are all designed to kind of be a starting place. We always include the author's email addresses, and we encourage people to email. Yep, I love the cover. We searched far and low and high and wide to find a cover that would show connection and family and smiles and already getting to know the baby in uterine. I love that. I love that photo.
Where can folks learn more about the magazine and obviously subscribe to it too?
Well, we have a website. It's www.somaticpsychotherapytoday.com. And we are offering a special, actually, for the July issue. For people that are sort of just new to us, you can just pre-order one issue. You can just pre-order the July issue and get that mailed to you. That way, if you're not quite sure if you want to subscribe for the whole year, you can just try it out once. Subscribers that do pay to subscribe get the magazine mailed to them. They also get a digital version. They get access to our digital portal on our website. Our website has all kinds of free information. We have free feature articles. We've got Dr. Heather Corwin, who does Take a Tool and Run. So every month she's got a great very quick video with exercises, things that you can do right off the bat. Dr. Serge Pringle, we have a column from him on relations and mindfulness, and he's up there free. We've got Kate White, who is incredible with pre and perinatal psychology and health, and she's doing a lot of work with the, John Chitty, who just passed, with his 2-chair work and working with infants and coming into the being, and she's writing lots about that. So we have free information on our website, but you don't get the magazine, and those articles aren't shared except with subscribers. And we do a magazine 3 times a year, and they're completely separate than the quick little blogs that we put up. Our full-length, really big, in-depth articles aren't in the magazine.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you, Nancy.
Oh, you're welcome.
Great to talk to you. I wish you much success with Somatic Psychotherapy today. Great magazine. I love it.
Thank you.
I found it and found you through it.
I appreciate finding us. It's good to know we have readers. We want people to read.
Yeah. Definitely include links on the show notes so people can check out the magazine. Hopefully, if they want to, they can just subscribe for 1 month. That's fine, but we really want to encourage them to do the whole year or multiple different years.
Yes, that would be
Cool. Well, look forward to having a conversation with you in the near future about the growth and development of somatic psychotherapy.
terrific. Thank you so much for your time, Michael. Appreciate our talk.